true freedom. It is not what the world has taught you to crave. It is not the absence of boundaries or the fullness of bank accounts. No, no. It is not in the applause of people or the conquest of success. There is a freedom that cannot be chained. There is a liberty that no jailer can take. And it begins in the mind, in the spirit, in the quiet place where no eye sees but his. Listen to me. There must come a shift, a holy transformation, not of circumstance but of perception, because you will never walk in freedom until you begin to think in freedom. The first shift. Oh, the first shift is from striving to surrender. So many walk through life exhausted, burdened under the weight of expectations, some placed by others, some crafted by their own hands. There is a striving that lives deep in the human heart, a relentless drive to be more, do more, achieve more. It whispers that freedom will come after the success, or after the approval, or after the perfect moment. But that kind of freedom never arrives because striving never ends. It keeps moving the finish line. The more you chase, the farther it goes. People wear themselves thin trying to control outcomes. Relationships, careers, even their own emotions. The world has taught us that to succeed, to survive, to be valid, we must do hustle. We must prove. We must earn. So we wake up early, stay up late, stretch ourselves across endless to-do lists and expectations, all in pursuit of something we were never meant to create by force. There's a lie many have believed in, that freedom is the reward of perfect effort. But real, lasting freedom isn't something you fight to grasp. It's something you receive when you let go. To shift from striving to surrender is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is the understanding that human strength is limited, and that no amount of striving can fill the deep places of the soul. We strive because we fear of failure, of judgment, fear of not being enough. But surrender says, I can't carry this, and I was never meant to. It is the holy act of placing everything, your success, your image, your plans, your fears, into hands that are stronger than yours. This kind of surrender is not passive. It doesn't mean giving up or checking out. It means stepping back from the illusion that you are in control of everything. It means recognizing the difference between effort and anxiety. You still show, act, still serve, but not from panic, peace. You lead from rest. You create from confidence that the outcome does not rest entirely on your shoulders. When striving rules the mind, there's no room for joy. You begin to measure your worth by your results. You think, if I do more, maybe then I'll matter. Maybe then I'll be seen. But surrender rewrites that story. It says, I already matter. I am already seen. I don't have to prove my worth. I only need to walk in it. Striving isolates. It builds walls around the heart because deep down, you don't want others to see how tired you are, how afraid you are that it's not enough. But surrender connects. It brings humility. It opens the soul to grace, to help, to love. It takes more courage to surrender than to strive because surrender requires trust, and trust requires vulnerability. For some, the idea of surrender feels like defeat. But it's not defeat, it's alignment. Alignment with something greater, something wiser, something eternal. It's choosing to release the burden of being your own savior. It's a quiet but powerful declaration. I trust, I let go. This shift isn't always instant. Sometimes it comes slowly, moment by moment, choice by choice. Each time you feel the need to push, to prove, to control, you pause, you breathe. You remember that true freedom does not come from effort. It flows from surrender. Fear is a silent thief. It doesn't always roar. It often whispers. It creeps into the mind slowly, disguised as caution, logic, or self-preservation. And before you realize it, fear has built a cage around your heart. It limits your vision, dulls your hope, and convinces you that safety is better than freedom. But fear was never meant to be your guide. It was never meant to decide the direction of your life. The moment you allow fear to lead, you forfeit the greater things waiting beyond its walls. Fear says, what if you fail? Faith answers, what if I fly? Fear focuses on all that could go wrong. It rehearses pain before it happens. It exaggerates shadows and calls them monsters. Faith, on the other hand, walks into the unknown with open hands. Not because it knows every step, but because it trusts the one who orders them. Faith doesn't need to see the entire map. It just needs to know who holds the compass. Fear is loud in the night. It replays old wounds, old regrets, and future scenarios that may never come to pass. It loves to shout when you're tired, when you're vulnerable, when you've come to the edge of something new. Because fear knows it cannot coexist with movement. It thrives in paralysis. It wants you stuck in the same patterns, the same cycles, the same excuses. But faith is motion. Faith is momentum. Faith takes the first step, even when the ground isn't guaranteed. There comes a moment when the mind must deciding, will I be ruled by what might happen? Or will I walk in the certainty of what I believe? This is the heart of the shift. From fear to faith. It's not about pretending fear doesn't exist. It's about refusing to let fear have the final word. Faith doesn't erase fear, it overrules it. It speaks louder, it speaks truer. It anchors the soul in something deeper than emotion. Fear looks at storms and says, turn back. Faith says, peace, be still. Fear sees obstacles as threats. Faith sees them as opportunities for growth. The difference lies in the lens. The same mountain that causes fear in one person can awaken courage in another. Not because the mountain changed, but because the mindset did. When you begin to operate in faith, your questions shift. You stop asking, what if I fall? And begin asking, what if this is exactly where I was meant to rise? There is no lasting freedom without faith, because freedom requires risk. Emotional, spiritual, sometimes even physical. To be free, you must be willing to step into the unfamiliar, to release your grip on certainty, to walk without knowing all the answers. That's the essence of faith. It is the bridge between what is and what could be. It sees beyond the now and believes in the promise yet unseen. You can't always silence fear, but you can stop feeding it. You can choose which voice gets your attention. Every day is a choosing to believe in the worst or hope for the best. And hope, real, rooted, unshakable hope, is a form of faith. It refuses to surrender to despair. It holds on when everything says to let go. It endures, it believes, it waits. The shift from fear to faith is not a one-time decision. It is a posture, a mindset, a daily, sometimes moment-by-moment choice. And it's in those small, hidden decisions, the quiet yes, when fear says no, that freedom is formed. Because every act of faith breaks a link in fear's chain. Every declaration of trust weakens its grip. And step by step, day by day, the soul begins to remember what it means to live unafraid. There is a heavy pressure that settles over the heart when life becomes a performance. When every move, every word, every gesture is measured, filtered, calculated for effect. The desire to be seen, to be approved, to be applauded. It can wrap itself around the soul like a noose. Slowly, quietly, it chokes the joy out of living. You find yourself trying to meet expectations that were never yours to carry, trying to impress people who are not even watching, trying to be perfect for a stage that never ends. Performance turns life into a constant audition. Even in silence, it echoes. It tells you that who you are is never quite enough, that there's always more to prove, more to fix, more to earn. It drives you to hide your true self behind layers of polished behavior. It convinces you that love must be earned, that belonging must be bought with sacrifice. And so you keep performing, afraid that if you stop, everything will fall apart. But it's not your authenticity that threatens your freedom. It's your performance. Presence is the antidote. Presence does not demand. It simply is. It invites you to exist without pressure, without pretense, without masks. It calls you back to the center of your being, the place where striving ceases and stillness speaks. In presence, there is no scoreboard, no audition, no competition. There is only connection, real connection, to yourself, to others, to the divine. Performance is about image, presence is about essence. In a world that rewards hustle and polish, it feels radical to slow down and just be. But freedom cannot survive in the atmosphere of performance. It suffocates under the weight of should and must. It withers in the light of comparison. Presence, on the other hand, breathes life into the spirit. It says, you are not what you do. You are not what you produce. You are not your highlight reel. It whispers a truth that performance tries to silencing, that your value was never in question. You don't have to show up perfect to be worthy. You don't have to earn love through exhaustion. You are allowed to be flawed and growing and learning. You are allowed to be human. That's what presence teaches. It brings grace into the places where performance brought pressure. It opens the door to healing because it invites honesty. It welcomes the parts of you that performance taught you to hide. When you live in presence, you begin to listen again. You listen to your own heartbeat, to the quiet nudges of intuition, to the still, small voice that performance drowned out with noise. You notice the moment. You begin to feel joy, not as an achievement, but as a natural response to being alive. You no longer feel the need to constantly explain or defend yourself, because presence is secure. It doesn't grasp for validation. It already knows its worth. There's a sacred strength that rises when you live from presence, a quiet authority, a gentle confidence. You don't need to prove anything, because you are grounded in something deeper than approval. You move with clarity. You speak with intention. You love without agenda. You lead without fear. Presence makes space for purpose. It frees you to operate from identity, not insecurity. The shift from performance to presence doesn't mean you stop doing. It means you stop pretending. It means your actions come from alignment, not anxiety. It means your service flows from overflow, not emptiness. You begin to live in rhythm with grace, not under the pressure of perfection. You begin to see yourself and others through the lens of compassion, not competition. You trade the applause of the crowd for the peace of knowing you are deeply seen, deeply known, and still completely loved. The past has a voice, and it often speaks louder than the present. It calls out from the shadows of memory, replaying scenes that you thought you had left behind. Words spoken in anger, choices made in fear, moments marked by loss or shame, they echo. And if you're not careful, those echoes begin to define you. They wrap around your mind and anchor you to a version of yourself that no longer exists. You begin to live in the aftermath, instead of the possibility of what's ahead. Captivity to the past doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it shows up quietly, in hesitation, in self-doubt, in the fear of trying again. You tell yourself stories. I failed before, so I'll fail again. I was abandoned once, so I will always be left. They said I wasn't enough, and maybe they were right. These thoughts may not be loud, but they are persistent. And over time, they shape the way you see yourself and the world. They convince you that your future is already written in the ink of your past. But there is a deeper truth that rises when you stop looking backward. The future is not a continuation of your worst days. It's the unfolding of grace. Vision is the gift that allows you to lift your eyes and see beyond what has been. Vision does not deny the reality of your past, but it refuses to be ruled by it. It looks forward. It believes that what is ahead can be greater than what is behind. It holds space for redemption, for restoration, for the kind of growth that only comes through fire. To shift from captivity of the past to vision of the future requires courage. It requires you to unclench your grip on old narratives. It means releasing the need to understand everything that happened. It means choosing healing over bitterness, choosing movement over memory, choosing to believe that you are still becoming. Vision invites you to step into a new story, one not written by your wounds but by your willingness to hope again. The mind often prefers the familiar, even if that familiarity is painful. There's a strange comfort in replaying what went wrong because it feels predictable. The unknown is frightening, but freedom never lives in the predictable. It lives in the willingness to step into what you have not yet seen. Vision is a forward motion. It stretches you. It demands faith. It asks you to speak life over barren places and to plant seeds in ground that has not yet borne fruit. When you live with vision, your past loses its grip. The shame that used to define you becomes a chapter, not a sentence. The mistakes that once paralyzed you become lessons, not limitations. You begin to see your journey differently, not as a straight line but as a canvas full of layers, each stroke leading to the next. Vision reclaims what pain tried to bury. It brings purpose to what once only brought sorrow. There will always be voices that try to drag you back, memories that resurface, doubts that linger. But every time you choose vision, you weaken the hold of yesterday. Every time you speak a word of hope, you push back against the silence of regret. Every step forward is a declaration that you are not done, that the story is still unfolding, that the best is not behind you, it is yet to come. Vision keeps your eyes fixed on the horizon, not the rearview mirror. It teaches your heart to dream again, to build again, to trust again. It replaces the weight of what was with the wonder of what could be. Freedom does not begin when the circumstances change. It doesn't start when the job is secured, when the debt is paid off, when the relationship is mended, or when the body is healed. Freedom doesn't wait for external permission. It begins in the mind. It begins with a thought, a shift, a moment of awakening when you realize that what holds you captive isn't always the situation around you, but the beliefs within you. You can be standing in an open field and still feel trapped, or you can be surrounded by limitations and still feel completely free, because freedom is not a location, it is a mindset. The mind is the soil where everything grows: fear or faith, bitterness or forgiveness, scarcity or abundance. Whatever takes root there will shape the way you live. That's why two people can face the same hardship and respond in entirely different ways. One sees impossibility, the other sees opportunity. One gives up, the other grows stronger. It's not because the road was easier for one, it's because the mindset was different. True freedom is born the moment you stop waiting for your life to change and start choosing how you see it. When the mind is filled with limitation, it begins to shrink every dream, every desire, every act of courage. You start to believe that you are only as free as your schedule, your salary, your past, or your status. But when you begin to understand that your thoughts have power, that you have the ability to choose what you dwell on, you unlock a deeper kind of liberty. Not the kind that can be taken from you, but the kind that lives within you. A freedom that cannot be cancelled by chaos, threatened by others, or lost in uncertain times. So many are waiting for their environment to improve before they believe peace is possible. They're waiting for a perfect moment to feel joy. But the truth is, the atmosphere of your life begins in your mind. What you focus on grows. What you meditate on shapes your mood, your relationships, your words, your actions. A bound mind creates a bound life, but a mind that is renewed daily, intentionally, with truth and hope, creates a life of increasing freedom, regardless of what comes. The shift comes when you stop saying, "I'll feel free wing," and begin to say, "I choose to live free now." That's not denial of reality. It's the decision to think above it. It's the refusal to be imprisoned by fear, by comparison, by resentment, or by regret. It's understanding that your freedom is not tied to anyone else's behavior or to any set of perfect conditions. You can't always control what happens, but you can always control what you believe about what happens. This inner freedom changes the way you move through the world. It brings peace where there used to be pressure. It brings clarity where there used to be confusion. It quiets the noise and lifts the weight. You begin to take responsibility for your thoughts instead of blaming everything on what's outside of you. And slowly, as your inner life expands, your outer life begins to follow. Decisions become clearer, relationships grow healthier, fear loses its grip. You're no longer reacting. You're responding with wisdom and calm. Freedom in the mind also means releasing the need for constant validation. When you believe deeply that your worth is not up for debate, you stop living for applause. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You stop chasing things that never satisfy. You learn to sit in stillness without anxiety, to speak with boldness without aggression, to act with purpose without panic. Your thoughts are no longer running wild in 1,000 directions. They are centered, rooted, aligned. And that alignment produces a life of power, not pressure. Rest has been misunderstood. It has been labeled as laziness, as weakness, as something earned only after every ounce of energy has been poured out. In a world that worships hustle and business, rest is seen as the absence of productivity, a luxury rather than a necessity. But that is not the truth. Rest is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is not a sign of giving up, it is a sign of trust. True rest is not about inactivity, it is about alignment. It is about coming back to center, remembering who you are, and where your strength really comes from. Many are exhausted not because they are doing too much, but because they are doing everything from a place of striving. Their bodies may be moving, but it's the soul that is tired. Tired of trying to hold everything together. Tired of proving, performing, pretending. Tired of showing up for everyone else and leaving nothing for themselves. But real rest goes deeper than sleep. It is soul deep. It is the kind of rest that restores not just the body, but the spirit. It is the kind of rest that reminds you you are not alone, and the weight was never yours to carry alone. There is a sacred power in choosing rest when everything in you wants to keep pushing. When the to-do list is long, when the demands are many, when the world expects you to keep producing, choosing rest becomes an act of faith. It is the declaration that your worth is not measured by your output. It is the quiet rebellion against a culture that says your value is tied to your business. It is the bold choice to believe that sometimes the most productive thing you can do is pause. Rest is a return to stillness, a return to clarity, a return to trust. It is the space where you stop striving to make everything happen in your own strength and start allowing grace to carry what you cannot. It is not the absence of responsibility, but the presence of peace in the midst of responsibility. It is not escape, it is encounter. It is where your soul meets something greater than itself and finds the strength it could never manufacture alone. In rest, fear begins to fade, not because circumstances suddenly change, but because your posture shifts. You are no longer looking at the storm, you are anchored in something deeper than the storm. Rest recalibrates your perspective. It reminds you that you are not the source, but the vessel, that the power sustaining you is not your own, and when you live from that place, everything changes. Your words carry more weight. Your actions are more intentional. Your presence becomes more peaceful, because you are no longer moving from pressure. You are moving from rest. It takes courage to rest, courage to step back when others are pushing forward, courage to listen to your limits and honor them, courage to trust that things will not fall apart if you stop for a moment to breathe. And that courage grows each time you choose rest over reaction, stillness over striving, faith over fear. The more you practice rest, the more you realize it is not weakness at all. It is strength in its most surrendered form. There is a rhythm built into life itself, the rhythm of day and night, of work and restoration, of movement and stillness. Ignoring that rhythm doesn't make you stronger, it makes you wary. Honoring it, on the other hand, brings life. It renews your mind. It restores your joy. It brings clarity to your decisions. It allows you to hear the quiet voice that gets lost in the noise of constant doing. In rest, your soul finds what it's been searching for. Not in more effort, but in more trust. The need for control is deeply woven into the fabric of human nature. It disguises itself as responsibility, as leadership, even as wisdom. But often, what we call control is nothing more than fear dressed in strategy. It is the fear of what might happen if we let go, if we surrender, if we stop micromanaging every detail of life. Control gives us the illusion of safety. It promises that if we can just keep everything in line, if we can predict and plan and prevent, then we will be secure. But the truth is, control does not protect us. It binds us. There is a tension in the heart when you are trying to control what was never meant to be in your hands. The weight of trying to hold everything together becomes unbearable. Relationships suffer because control leaves no room for trust. Dreams suffer because control demands perfection before progress. Faith suffers because control resists surrender. The very things we want to nurture, peace, connection, purpose, begin to wither under the tight grip of control. What starts as a desire for order slowly becomes a prison of anxiety. Freedom begins when control is released, not because chores is better, but because surrender makes space for grace. When you release control, you are not giving up your responsibility. You are giving up your obsession with certainty. You are choosing trust over tension. You are choosing to believe that there is something greater holding the pieces, even when you cannot. Control says, I must figure it all out. Surrender says, I trust that I will be guided. One clings, the other opens. One exhausts, the other restores. Letting go of control does not mean becoming passive. It means becoming aligned. It means learning to discern what is yours to carry and what was never yours to begin with. It means knowing the difference between action and anxiety, between responsibility and control. When you are led by peace instead of panic, your actions flow from wisdom instead of worry. Your decisions come from clarity, not fear. You begin to move with intention, not reaction. There is a deep rest that comes with surrender. A rest that does not come from having all the answers, but from knowing that you don't need to. The desire to control everything is rooted in the fear of what might go wrong. But surrender is rooted in the trust that even if things don't go as planned, you are not alone in navigating them. It allows for detours, for delays, for divine timing. It makes room for mystery. It welcomes the unexpected, not with panic, but with peace. People who surrender are not weaker. They are freer. They are not careless. They are courageous. It takes courage to release your grip, to stop managing every outcome, to let go of the timeline you've created in your mind and make space for what is truly meant for you. It takes strength to trust when the path is unclear, but it is that very trust that invites peace to take root where anxiety once lived. When control is your master, you become reactive. Every change feels like a threat. Every delay feels like a failure. But when surrender leads, you become responsive. You listen more deeply. You observe with wisdom. You act from groundedness, not from desperation. Control demands results. Surrender welcomes process. Control fears failure. Surrender finds meaning even in the mess. The grip loosens, the breath deepens. And in that holy release, your soul begins to remember what it means to live untangled from fear. Identity is not something we earn, nor is it something others can give us. It is something we remember. Beneath the noise, beneath the pressure, beneath the layers we've built to survive, there is a core truth that does not change. But so often, we forget who we are. We begin to see ourselves through the eyes of our past, our failures, our wounds. We measure ourselves by external standards. Success, beauty, recognition, and when those things waver, so does our sense of worth. We become strangers to ourselves, chasing validation in places that were never meant to define us. There is a deep weariness that comes from trying to become what you already are. You strive to be loved, not realizing you were already chosen. You try to be worthy, not knowing that your worth was never in question. The world teaches performance before identity. It teaches you to build a brand instead of knowing your name. But when identity is not rooted in truth, it becomes a moving target. You start to believe that you are only as good as your last success, as lovable as your last relationship, as valuable as your last contribution. And that kind of living will always keep you restless. To reclaim true freedom, you must return to the truth of who you are, not who people expect you to be, not your pain shaped you into, but who you are always meant to be. This is not about perfection or potential. It's about essence, about the unique print on your life that cannot be replicated or erased. Identity is not just a concept, it is a grounding place. When you live from your true identity, you are not easily shaken by changing circumstances. You are not swayed by trends, nor defined by the opinions of others. You carry a quiet confidence, not because of what you've done, but because of who you are. Remembering who you are begins with unlearning who you are not. It means releasing labels that were never yours to wear. It means letting go of the voices that told you were too much or not enough. It means walking away from patterns that made you feel small so you could stay accepted. Identity requires honesty. It requires courage. It requires you to look inward and listen for the voice that is deeper than fear, louder than shame, and more constant than the world's applause. When you live from identity, you stop striving to prove your place. You know that you belong before you do anything to earn it. You move with purpose, not pressure. You speak with clarity, not performance. You make decisions that align with your values, not with other people's expectations. You no longer need to copy anyone else's path, because you are anchored in your own. You find peace in your presence. You find strength in your stillness. You become someone who leads without needing control, who loves without needing validation, who serves without losing yourself in the process. There is a freedom that comes when you stop asking the world who you are and start listening to the truth that has been within you all along. You stop living to be and start living from acceptance. You stop performing to be seen and start showing up because you already are. Your identity is not fragile. It is firm. It does not crack under pressure. It does not vanish with failure. It holds you steady when everything else feels uncertain. And in that stability you rise, not to prove but to be. Not to impress, but to live. You begin to carry yourself with quiet authority, rooted not in status but in truth. You show up whole, not because life is perfect, but because you know who you are even in the midst of imperfection. Beloved, when the mind shifts, the whole life shifts. These are not merely ideas to admire. They are invitations to transformation, to release the grip of control, to remember who you are, to rest from striving, to see not from the shadows of the past but with the clarity of vision, to live not from fear but from the deep place of freedom within. These are not things the world can give you, nor can it take them away. They are gifts born of surrender, forged in truth, awakened in stillness, and sustained by grace. Freedom does not come by accident, it comes by decision, and that decision begins in the mind. Let that be where your new story begins.